Coming from the NFL, you know a good stadium when you see one. What do you think of this?
It's pretty good. It's among the best, I think. I think you're 100% right. Thanks for having me.
Is this Lumen Field in Seattle for atmosphere?
Listen, this is kind of one of one. It's pretty great. It's beautiful. I think Dean Beeman was way ahead of his time in sort of bringing the stadium concept to golf, and it's certainly have stood the test of time, so it's great.
These guys are independent contractors, so they play when and where they want. That's been the way it has gone for a long time. Superstars typically play around 20 tournaments a year. So how do you get them to commit to playing more?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, they're obviously independent contractors, and that's not going to change. There's no reason to change it. There's no desire to change it. As to your question, how do you get them to play? Well, I think like most sports, you design a competitive model that have the incentives in place for them to play as often as you can get them together. I think you see that in a lot of sports, whether it's if you sit starters or if not, it depends on really the competitive model and where you are in the standings. So I don't think we necessarily expect everybody to play every event, but we'd like them to play as many events. And I think when we're done with the competitive model, we will have improved the fields across all of our events.
Brian, you've spent years in the NFL where almost everything runs at about 100 miles an hour on Sunday. Now you're stepping into a sport where we debate things like bunker rakes and yardage books. What has surprised you most about the ecosystem of golf? Is it that you're effectively dealing with 125 owners or 4 entities that have a huge say in how the game is run and ruled?
Listen, it's definitely different, but I don't think it's worse. It's just different. And I think every professional sport is set up differently. As to what has surprised me, honestly, before I got here and was considering the job, there was a narrative a bit around golf, professional golf in general, and the PGA Tour specific, that it was broken or that it was split, that it was weakened. And while I think that the recent competition had exposed some weaknesses, when you looked at the fans of the game, when you looked at the growth of the people participating in the game here in this country, golf is really strong. And the PGA Tour had a strength that I think got clouded by a lot of the noise around LIV or some of the other things that had come to the sport. So I saw an underlying strength there that we weren't talking enough about and weren't leaning into. And I think, pick your metric, look at television ratings, look at the number of people watching on digital, whatever you want to pick. There's a metric there that says golf is strong. So I think that was a bit of a surprise and a pleasant one. I think the other surprise, and I talked a little bit about this morning, was about the players. That, hey, the players, they're going to have their own point of view. The players, it's going to be hard to get things done. Honestly, in my experience with the players, they're independent contractors. They know what they want to do, but they're also smart. They're also pretty progressive about changes in the sport. They know what they want to see. And I found of all of the constituencies around the professional golf world to try to change for the good, they, in a lot of ways, are some of the easiest. So that was not the narrative coming in. And that's my experience in individual conversations. It's clearly my experience on the board, where we have the majority of player directors, and then everywhere in between. So that has been a pleasant surprise for me.
We're hearing the phrase promotion and relegation. Technically, what could that look like?
Well, I think technically what it could look like, and the details obviously haven't been worked out, but the idea is, as we have our elevated events, and then we have our other events that we're also going to improve, by leaning into the meritocracy, there'll be an ability for those people in this second track of events to play their way into the top events. A promotion relegation could be at the end of the season where a certain percentage fall out of the top tier and the others sort of come in. There could be some promotion along the way. I think that's all being talked about. But the idea is to create playing opportunities, increase the strength of the fields, but also lean into the meritocracy is so we know who the best golfers in the world are. They're the best golfers who are actually playing the best golf.
How is that different than what you have now, this Aon Swing 5? You know, these, what we would, you know, they don't call them second-tier tournaments, but it's the cognizant. It's you know, tournaments like that where guys are trying to play their way into what you now call the signature event. So how is that different?
We have elements of it. I agree with you. But the elements we have are complicated. I I would submit that if you were to sit down and try to explain to a sports fan exactly how that works, it gets really hard. I have a hard time understanding it. Our players are really good at understanding it, but it's a bit like the tax code. That's hard to build a sport that appeals to a lot of people when it's complicated to understand how it works, number one. So we need to simplify it. Second, there's no consistency of the fields. We're not sure who's going to show up. And I don't mean this larger issue of guys should be independent contractors and decide where they go. It's unclear how the competitive model is influencing who shows up and when. And all fans are saying are, let's get these guys together more often. So we need a system that actually does that, and I think promotion relegation will help that.
Watching your press conference today, Brian, and you did really well. It was excellent, and it was very interesting. I listened to it very closely. Obviously, the PGA Tour is going to be very American-centric going forward, and rightly so. But you did mention an international element to it. And I'm just curious, were you referring to North and South of America in terms of Canada and Mexico, or are you looking also a little bit more towards a relationship with Europe and maybe even as far as Asia or Australia? Is that something that could be on the horizon or part of these elevated events?
Yeah, it can. And I got a question towards the end of the presser, and I'm glad somebody asked that. We are thinking about international, and I think it's all of those things. We play a tournament in Canada now. We've been in Mexico. But we also have this great strategic alliance with the European Tour. And I mentioned the tradition of that tour. The tradition of both tours together is an important one. We have a strategic alliance which we would like to extend and amend for the benefit of both tours, which we've had meetings and we're hopefully starting discussions on that. But I think while we're concentrating the schedule in the summer in this country for lots of reasons, it's one way you can get a lot of events close together. I don't need to educate you on the value of the sports market in the United States. The bulk of the sports dollars, let's be honest, in the world are in the United States, so you need to have a strong presence there. Yeah. But I think as we move into the fall and even into early January, we have opportunities to play elsewhere, and that includes internationally. Right. And we're hoping that could lean more into our European Tour partnership or other things. So we haven't quite gotten to that part of the work in the committee. That's on tap for the next month or so, but that's clearly in the plans.
Good.
Yeah. Ryan, you threw out the number in the press conference today, $30 billion, roughly the ceiling of sports media rights available. And with the NFL maybe getting to 20 or 25, 24 billion of that, and the NBA close to 7 billion of that, doesn't leave much for the rest of the other sports. How does that fundamentally change the world of golf and your sports media strategy?
Well, I think what it does, and I mentioned today, look, the NFL is and I've had plenty of experience there, and as I've watched it grow, it has earned a spot in this country to command the bulk of the media rights available, and that's fine. But because of the dynamics of the rest of the media industry, that $30 billion isn't growing much. And so what that's going to force is some tough decisions for media partners to make about what sports they invest in and what they don't. I think professional golf should think about that. I think it increases the onus on us as a sport to make sure we have the best competitive product for our fans and for our partners, so that when we sit down with our media partners to negotiate and talk about a new partnership, that we're as strong as possible. And it's not just about the money. You can't grow a sport in this country unless you have a very good media distribution strategy. When I was at the NFL, we were running a play that Pete Rozelle invented in the 60s, and that play was essentially get broad distribution and you can build your sport. He invented it, he did it really well, and that's how professional football overcame college football, and baseball is the most popular sports in this country. It had a lot to do with mass distribution of your product. Golf needs that. I think golf needs to be more united in that, and I think we need to think very strategically about that if we want to grow the interest in the sport.
Brian, at your press conference, you said this morning that the entire ecosystem is financed by professional golf. So going forward, how will you approach the PGA Tour's relationship with the 4 major championships?
Well, I think the relationship is a really good one. I think the majors represent the pinnacle of our sport in a lot of ways, where they have a tremendous amount of tradition. It's respected by fans. It's respected by, clearly, players. And it's some of the few times, I think, in the golfing world where you really blow past golf fans and make a meaningful impact into sports fans. And that's to be celebrated, and that's great. I think we should be working together to get more of that. I've talked a lot about how you have this growth in the sport of golf where, you know, it's grown about 40% since COVID. And people who play golf in this country, those are remarkable numbers. Half of that growth is under the age of 35. But the average age of a golf telecast, major or not, on television is 66 years old. There's an opportunity to close that and build the sport and build professional golf. And I think we all need to work together to do that, while not taking the golf fans we have for granted, but actually growing the sport well beyond golf fans. And I think it has the potential to do that.
Brian, again, going back to the schedule again, and I'm interested again, this time I'm going to ask about the big cities and your move towards moving to big cities. And, you know, there's a lot of tournaments on the PGA Tour, and most of them are small cities. My experience in Europe, 2019, I oversaw and ran the Irish Open as an ambassador, including the choice of venue. And I brought it down to a little place that's everybody's favourite auntie, Lahinch Golf Club, southwest of Ireland, a little small, tiny community. And we blew it out of the water. We sold out everything. We sold out business. The community really got involved. It was a massive, big deal. And subsequently, Irish Opens, although they're successful and even moved back to the Dublin area, they don't seem to be able to generate the buzz, the excitement, and maybe the commercial activity that this little place down the southwest of Ireland did. So with that in mind, as a test case, I know Ireland's very different than the American market. Are you really set on moving to the big cities and away from the smaller communities in America?
Well, you said something there. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think we can play more tournaments in bigger markets, but not abandon smaller markets.
But with a reduced schedule, where are you going to get the bandwidth?
Well, you remember, we have a lot of these two tracks, right? We're trying to increase the number of elevated events, but that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to dramatically reduce the other events that ladder up to that. And I think there are a lot of advantages to playing in smaller markets. The smaller communities love it. They show up.
Yeah.
There's a lot to do in New York, right? There's a lot of competition for your time.
But there's also a lot of competition for your dollar corporately, because there's so many other sports and concerts and all kinds of activities there too.
Of course, but it's also where the people are, right? Both current fans and new fans. And when we talk to fans, when we talk to sponsors, and we talk to broadcast partners, they're asking for bigger markets. Right. Not exclusively, right, but more bigger markets. And so I think that's really the spirit of what we're trying to do, and that creates, you know, more value, but also it just brings it to more fans. And so I think it's important to understand we'll have a mix of big markets and smaller markets as well. And again, I said it today, you need more than just a market to make a successful golf tournament. You have to have the right course. You have to have the right local partners who know what they're doing. Right. So there's a lot. It's just not, you just can't drop a tournament in Philadelphia and expect it to work.
Brian, you said earlier there will be another update in June. So what do you think you can get accomplished over the next few months?
Well, we're ambitious. While we answered some questions today, we still have a lot more to answer, big and small. So we would like to make as much progress as we can by June, knowing that at one point we need to make enough progress. So it's one thing to talk about these things, it's nothing to actually do them, and we really want to put them in place, and that takes time and it takes effort. So, you know, I don't want to make any promises, but we want to make as much progress as possible by June. Well, I think we've made a lot of progress to date, but I think there's more work to do.
And just one quick question on promotion relegation for the players. Could that happen with the tournaments too? Could you have a smaller tournament that would turn into one of the bigger ones? Vice versa? Yeah.
Yes, that's possible.
That's possible, okay.
Yeah. Listen, market size doesn't always mean the tournament's good or bad. It's just a contributing factor. Okay. I mean, we have plenty of great tournaments in small markets that really work. So,
and you know, Brian, I think by now, our audience, they tell us, we watch you all the time. Just tell them there's not going to be less golf. That's because we've been just assure them that they're going to be well-struck 7-irons flying every hour of every day.
Well, I will say that there's this fear when we talked about this in August and started throwing the word around scarcity. And I tried to clarify that today, that scarcity just means higher quality, more higher quality events, and make every event matter. That's really the goal. I'll be honest. Maybe it's a silly aspiration. I mentioned this, and maybe it's naive. I want as many of these as we can get, because this showcases the sport in ways that you don't have to spend a lot of time watching golf and appreciate it. So I want to do that, but that does not mean we're going to drastically reduce these other events. And you want to be on the Golf Channel and watch a Thursday round of a tournament in a small market, it will be there, I promise you.
You have great stadiums from here all the way to California. Pebble Beach, Riviera, Hilton Head, keep going. And you have the most loyal, best fans in the world. Golfers are crazy. So.
And we are not, and we will not take them for granted, I promise you.
We appreciate everything you've done so far, and we look forward to what's to come over the next few months.
And thank you for all you do. Thank you for being here.
Appreciate it. That is the PGA Tour's new CEO, Brian Rolapp.